The bell above the cafe door has a way of sounding like a memory, soft, inevitable, a circle closing. On most evenings, it rings only for the wind. The town is small, tucked between fields that glow green in summer and silver in winter. And people keep their rituals the way they keep their keys, in the same pocket, every day, until the lining thins. I returned 3 months ago, when the city's noise could no longer drown my thoughts. This cafe used to belong to Mrs. Whitlow, who believed a good cup of coffee could keep a person from leaving a place they meant to stay. When she passed, the shop sat quiet for a year, like a paused song. I bought it with a small loan and larger fear, then painted the walls the color of clouded cream, keeping her old sign harbor-like calf, because I liked to think light could harbor a person as much as a place could. Most days begin with the same choreography: the door, the switch, the grinder's hum. I stack plates with their tiny chips turned toward the wall. I draw a chalk sun beside the day's pie blueberry. Today, the filling staining my fingers, an ocean dusk. I play records on the turntable, that clicks like a metronome of another time. When the needle lands, the first breath of music always feels like someone is about to speak. At 5:30, the fields release their warmth. You can smell hay and faraway rain. I like this hour. The town exhales, and the cafe inhales, and we are, for a few minutes, the same lung. On the shelf behind the counter sits a cigar box that once kept my father's cufflinks. Inside it are letters that I never mailed, 15 of them. Addressed to a summer that has been over for 10 years. Addressed to a name I don't speak here. I tell myself they are drafts, but they are really maps of places that don't exist anymore. I don't open the box often. Tonight though, the box feels heavier, as if paper can gather weather. A couple takes the corner table, their palms flat against each other's cups, to warm more than coffee. Mr. Avery from the post office orders a slice of blueberry pie and asks again whether I'll host open mic nights like the old days. Songs keep a town honest, he says, and I nod the way I always do, promising a future I haven't learned how to hold. When business slows, I choose a record with a scratched midnight label. The sleeve reads Willow Road in ink that has survived more hands than one song ought to. The first guitar chord opens like a window. I don't play this one often. The melody knows me too well. There was a summer when we recorded that song in a bedroom whose wallpaper peeled at the corners like paper moons. He played guitar on the floor, back against the bed, and I sang into a microphone we balanced on a stack of field guides to birds. We were young enough to believe the right chorus could keep time from closing doors. His name was Ethan. He told me once that music was just a way to measure distance between heartbeats. Between people, between what we say and what we mean to say. We promised each other 1,000 little forevers in a town that could barely keep streetlights on past 9. On the turntable, the guitar thrums, and the room grows full of a road we once walked, dust on our ankles, the sky a bowl of heat. I turn the volume down, but the memory refuses to soften. In the reflection of the front window, I see myself hold very still, like a person trying not to spill. At 6, the bell rings. It's only the wind. At 6:20, Mrs. Lively buys scones for her book club, and tells me she is learning to like endings, even imperfect ones. At 6:40, the street drifts quiet again, a river deciding not to be a river anymore. The letter arrives at 6:50, carried by a traveler with a map folded like a fragile secret in his pocket. He is not Ethan. I know that before I know anything else. He has the edges of the road on him, dust, a sunburned kindness, a hesitation at thresholds. He stands at the counter and studies the chalk menu, as if looking for the word that will make everything simpler. Hi, I say, and the word feels like a coin I haven't spent in a while. Hi, he returns, and his voice belongs to mountains. Coffee? Black? And this song? What's it called? Willow Road. I steady the needle. By a band that never made a record. Just a tape that passed between friends. Between two people, I don't say. He nods, as if that explains more than it should, then slides an envelope across the counter. The paper is creased and traveled, the kind of white that has learned to be gray. My name is written on it in my own hand. The date on the corner is July 18th, 10 years ago. I think this is yours, he says gently, as if delivering the weather. I don't touch it right away. The room narrows. The song pulls a thread through my chest. My name on my own letter is a door opening toward a door. I remember the mailbox we used to meet beside, the swallows stitching evening with their veer and arc. I remember writing this letter at a kitchen table in a rented room, the fan ticking like a nail on glass. Where did you get it? I ask, finally. Along the coast, he says, eyes finding the window and then returning as if he had considered leaving and chose not to. A roadside thrift shop. Box of lost and found letters near the door. The owner said they were saved from a flood. I recognized the cafe name on the return address. He gestures toward the sign. Harbor. Figured I'd try. When I opened the envelope, the paper sighs the way old things sigh, giving up what they kept. I read the first line and have to sit down. If I mail this, it means I'm brave. If I keep it, it means I'm not ready to say goodbye to a world that includes you. Outside, the wind rises, bringing with it the rumor of rain. Inside, the traveler watches me with the careful silence of a person holding a glass in a moving train. He says nothing. I am grateful for both the company and the restraint. The letter is not long. It is the kind of small truth you only write once. I remember every word as if I had written it yesterday with a pen that stung. When I reach the last line, the record clicks and begins again. The same chord opens the same window. The past is nothing if not persistent. Thank you, I say to the traveler, and the words are a little broken because the room is full of a 10-year-old summer. What do I owe you? He shakes his head. Maybe just a story, he says, eyes a shade that belongs to rivers. How a letter leaves and finds its way back home. I pour his coffee and set a slice of blueberry pie beside it on the house. The bell rings again as two teenagers tumble in, laughing in that invincible way I remember like a language I used to speak. The cafe resumes its small music, plates, spoons, voices, the song. Life makes its gentle noise. When the traveler finds a table, he takes a folded map from his pocket. It is the county with thin blue lines for streams and a red circle drawn around Willow Road. He traces the circle with one finger, as if trying to understand the shape of something that can't be owned. You're looking for it? I ask, surprised at the steadiness of my voice. Not the road, he says, without looking up. The feeling? Places carry echoes, I think. Sometimes you follow the sound. The rain begins like a rumor becoming fact. I close the front windows halfway and angle the sign to keep the glass from rattling. For a moment, everything smells like summer after a long thirst. Before closing, I lift the tone arm and let the record sleep. The cafe dims to its night-shaped lamps, kind as fireflies, chairs tucked in like knees beneath blankets. I place the letter back in its envelope, and after a pause, lay it inside the cigar box, among 15 other versions of a heart learning to be brave. On the way out, I lock the door and stand beneath the awning while the rain writes on the street. The sky and I agree to keep each other's secrets for one more night. Somewhere far off, thunder rolls like a cart of apples. The traveler steps into the rain and lifts his face to it, smiling as if he recognizes an old friend. See you tomorrow, he asks, one foot already in the weather. Yes, I answer, surprising myself. There's more pie. And maybe another song, he says. Maybe, I say, tasting the word the way I used to taste summer. He lifts a hand and walks into the rain, past the window where my reflection holds still, as if not to spill. I watch until his outline becomes one more line in the town's handwriting. Behind me in the quiet cafe, the letter remembers how to be a beginning. The rain did not stop that night. It sang against the roof until the dawn turned the windows pale, until puddles stitched the road like silver threads. When I unlocked the cafe the next morning, the air smelled of wet earth and beginnings. It was the kind of morning that felt halfway between forgetting and remembering. The traveler was already there, sitting at the bench under the awning with a steaming cup of coffee I hadn't brewed. You're early, I said, brushing the rain from my coat. Couldn't sleep, he answered. Places like this have a way of keeping you awake with quiet. He smiled, faint but real, the kind of smile you give when the world still surprises you. I noticed the map again, folded neatly beside his hand. The edges were damp, the ink swollen where rivers once ran. You're still looking for that road? I asked. He nodded. Or maybe what it means. He unfolded the paper with the care of someone holding wings. The red circle around Willow Road was thicker now, as if he'd traced it more than once in the dark. I used to live near there, I said. Before the town rebuilt the bridge. He looked up. So it's real, was I corrected. A long gravel path that led nowhere and everywhere. People said if you followed it to the end, you'd find the sea. But we only ever found windmills, wheat, and sunsets that made you believe in something you couldn't name. That's more than enough, he murmured. He sipped the coffee, then hesitated. Do you ever think some places remember us back? I smiled. Maybe that's why I came home. He studied me for a long second, and I could feel the question he didn't ask. Instead, he reached into his coat and placed something on the counter, small silver guitar pick worn smooth in the center. My breath caught. I found it inside the envelope, he said quietly. Didn't think it belonged to me. I picked it up. The edges were scratched, the back engraved with 2 letters, E and E. Ethan had made it the summer we recorded Willow Road. He said every song needed a talisman to keep it from getting lost. I'd forgotten how it looked till now. Thank you, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. He nodded, understanding too much. He must have mattered. I wanted to answer, but words tangled in the soft machinery of my chest. The only sound was the hum of the grinder warming up, the scent of beans lifting like a sigh. By noon, the sky cleared into a pale blue sheet. Locals came and went. Mr. Avery, again, claiming the new rain made the coffee taste truer. Mrs. Lively brought me a jar of lavender honey, saying she dreamt I'd need sweetness soon. The traveler stayed by the window, drawing shapes on the condensation with his fingertip. Circles mostly. Roads, maybe. Around 3, I poured him a refill. Are you planning to stay long? I asked. He shrugged. Until the road finds me, I guess. I move from town to town, collecting fragment songs, postcards, sometimes letters. People call me a courier, but I like to think I'm returning echoes. The phrase caught me. Returning echoes. That's a beautiful way to get lost, I said. He laughed softly. Or to be found. Outside, the rain had left the world washed clean. The sky stretched wide and forgiving, the kind of blue that only comes after surrender. I watched him spread the map again, tracing paths as though listening for a pulse beneath the paper. Maybe Willow Road isn't a place anymore, I said. Maybe it's what happens when you remember someone long enough that it turns into light. He looked at me, eyes quiet as dusk. Then you've already found it. The clock above the counter ticked toward 4. The traveler folded his map, slipped the guitar pick back into my palm. Keep it, he said. Seems like it still knows where home is. When he left, the cafe door swung slow, as if reluctant. Through the window, I saw him walking down the street, his figure thinning into the afternoon haze. The bell chimed once, then silence settled in like dust on an old melody. That night, after closing, I placed the guitar pick on the counter beside the cigar box. The rain began again, softer this time, as though repeating a lullaby it had once forgotten. And as I turned off the lights, I thought about echoes, the kind that leave, the kind that return, and the rare kind that teach you how to listen. The 3rd morning arrived with sunlight soft enough to be forgiven. Rainwater still clung to the windows like ghosts, reluctant to leave, and the street smelled faintly of coffee, pine, and thyme. I opened the cafe early, not because I needed to, but because silence felt too heavy to sit with. At 7, the traveler returned. This time he carried a Camerald boxy, with a crack across the lens that caught the light like a scar. He ordered black coffee again. No sugar, no cream. Habit, he said, though his tone hinted that habits were sometimes just the shape of loneliness. He sat near the same window as before. The morning sun landed on his shoulder, turning the dust in the air into tiny galaxies. I pretended to clean the counter, but I watched him from the corner of my eyes. The way his fingers lingered near the rim of the cup, the way his gaze followed the road beyond the glass. Something about him was starting to echo. You photograph places? I asked finally. Sometimes, he said. Mostly moments that don't stay still. I smiled. You mean memories? He lifted his eyes to me, and for a second the room forgot its shape. They never really leave, do they? He said softly. The clock ticked between us like a small metronome of truth. He slid one of the photographs across the table. I looked down and froze. It was a photo of Willow Road. The same windmill, the same wheat fields, even the same tilt of light across the grass. But there was more, 2 figures walking side by side, one holding a guitar case, the other, a white dress fluttering in the wind. I couldn't breathe. That was taken years ago, he said. The film developed late. I found it in a box in Portland, marked for return. No address, just the name Harborlight. I thought it was coincidence, until I saw you. I touched the edge of the photograph. The image trembled, not the photo, but my hand. That's me, I whispered. And him, I know. The traveler's eyes were steady. You loved him. There was no accusation in his tone, only a gentle certainty, as if he'd walked through enough towns to recognize the weight love leaves behind. I didn't answer, because answering would mean pulling the thread and watching everything unravel. Instead, I asked, why are you really here? He smiled faintly. Because sometimes the letters we return aren't meant for mailboxes. What do you mean? Some are meant for people who stopped writing. For a moment the world outside the window, blurred, the horizon smudged into watercolor. A flock of sparrows lifted from the telephone wire, their wings scattering light like language. And in that instant, I felt it, the faint, impossible rhythm of something that used to be. His voice, low and quiet, filled the space between us. I met a man once, he said, on a bus near the coast. He carried a tape recorder and said he was keeping time for someone he might never see again. He talked about a song called Willow Road. I froze again. What was his name? The traveler looked at the light bending across his coffee, as though the answer were floating there. He didn't say. But before he left, he told me this. If you ever find Harborlight, tell her I finished the song. My heart forgot to beat for a breath. The clock, the street, the air, everything folded into that single sentence. He finished the song. For 10 years I had lived with an unfinished melody, one that ended at the place he walked away. Now, somewhere, it had found its way back through this stranger. The traveler stood. I'll be leaving tomorrow, he said. But maybe you should come with me to the coast. There's a studio there that keeps lost tapes. Maybe your song's waiting. I wanted to speak, but the words sat behind my teeth like fragile glass. Instead, I nodded. Slowly, carefully, like a person who'd just remembered how hope feels. As he walked to the door, sunlight followed him, a gold thread, unspooling across the floor. He paused, hand on the frame, and turned once more. Tomorrow, he said, we follow the echo. The bell chimed, and the cafe filled again with the small, patient sound of a world starting over. The road to the coast looked different than I remembered. Or maybe it was me who had changed, the kind of change that happened slowly, quietly, like the way dawn replaces night without asking. The traveler drove an old green truck whose radio only played static and wind. We didn't talk much. Silence filled the cab like a familiar song. Sometimes he would hum under his breath, low and rough, as if echoing something older than both of us. Outside, the fields unrolled like memories, gold, endless, trembling in the sunlight. Every few miles, the traveler would stop, take a photograph, then mark the spot on his map with a tiny circle. Places speak, he said once. You just have to listen long enough. I nodded, because that was something Ethan used to say, too. By noon, clouds began to gather, the color of tin and sleep. The first drops hit the windshield like punctuation. The traveler smiled. Looks like rain wants to join us. We pulled over near a cliff road that overlooked the ocean. The wind was sharp, tasting of salt and thunder. Down below, waves folded over themselves, repeating the same sentence over and over, something about return, and something about loss. I stepped out, the rain immediately finding my hair, my hands, my heart. For the first time in years, I didn't run from it. Here, the traveler said, handing me an old tape recorder, the kind with 2 small reels and a button that stuck a little when pressed. Found this in the box with the letter. Thought you might want to hear what's on it. My fingers trembled as I took it. The recorder was light, but it carried gravity, the weight of something once unfinished. I pressed play. A hiss first. Then wind. Then his voice. Emma, if you're hearing this, it means I wasn't brave enough to say it in person. The song isn't done. It never will be, because it was never about music. It was about you, the way you made quiet sound, like something I could live inside. If someday a letter finds its way back to you, follow it. It'll know the road better than I ever did. Static swallowed the last word. The rain came harder, blurring sea and sky into one aching gray. I pressed the recorder to my chest, as if I could stop it from trembling. The traveler said nothing. He stood beside me, the wind tangling his hair, his presence calm and steady, like the line of the horizon. He loved you, he said after a long while. I think he still does, I whispered. In every sound the rain makes. We stayed like that until the clouds opened completely, until the world was nothing but water and memory. When the rain softened, I looked toward the sea. A faint rainbow arched over the waves, fragile as a promise. The traveler unfolded his map again. Tomorrow, he said, there's a studio down the coast that keeps the lost tapes. Maybe this one belongs there. I smiled, my cheeks still wet. Maybe we do too. He looked at me then, really looked, as if reading a story written in fog. You still believe in second chances? Not in love, I said, but in healing. He nodded, folding the map slowly. That's enough. The sun broke through in threads, lighting the truck in gold. We drove again, the road slick with the memory of rain. And as the coast curved toward the horizon, I realized something simple and true. You don't always find the person again. Sometimes you find the part of yourself they left behind. The sea was louder here. It didn't crash, it breathed. Each wave exhaled against the rocks, as if trying to tell a secret it had repeated for centuries. The sky hung low, brushed with gray and gold. And somewhere between the clouds and the horizon, the world felt half asleep, half awake. The traveler parked the truck near a weathered wooden sign that read, "The Room of Lost Songs." It looked less like a studio and more like a memory that refused to fade. The windows were fogged, and from inside came the faint hum of reels turning. The air smelled of salt, dust, and magnetized time. A woman greeted USA curator, perhaps, her hair tied with a ribbon that once might have been blue. "You're here for a retrieval?" she asked. The traveler nodded, handing her the small tape recorder. A lost recording, possibly from a man named Ethan. Her eyes softened. "We keep those kinds of ghosts," she said. She took the tape with both hands, reverent as a prayer, then disappeared behind a curtain. We waited. Rain began again, light as ash. I traced my fingertip along the wood grain of the counter, breathing in the ocean through the open window. My heart was a clock. I no longer tried to fix it, only knew how to ache on time. After a few minutes, the curtain moved. The woman returned, holding a pair of old headphones and a labeled cassette. On its side, written in Ethan's unmistakable script, "Harbor Light, Final Mix." I reached for the headphones. My hands were shaking. "Would you like to listen alone?" she asked. I almost said yes. But then I looked at the traveler, the quiet, steady kindness in his eyes, and I realized some echoes are too heavy for one heart. "Stay," I said. She pressed play. At first, silence. Then, a soft guitar, the same opening from Willow Road, but slower, older, more fragile. And then, his voice. "Emma, if you find this, it means I learned how to finish what I started. This isn't a goodbye. It's a thank you for the summers, for the songs, for the way you looked at me like I was already forgiven. I left because I thought love was a fire that burns too fast. But you taught me it can also be light that stays. So if someday the rain sounds like music, know that it's me keeping time with you, under the same sky." The tape clicked, but the sound lingered long after it ended. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. The body doesn't always remember how. But then the wind pushed through the half-open window, carrying salt, song, and something that felt like him. The first tear fell before I could name it. The traveler turned the volume down and didn't speak. He simply reached over and covered my hand with his, steady, human, real. And in that moment, I understood what Ethan had meant, that love was never meant to be owned. It was meant to keep playing, in whoever still listens. Outside, the rain blurred everything except light. The ocean looked endless again. When we left the studio, the curator said quietly, "Most people come here looking for closure. You two walked out with an opening." We drove in silence, the tape now rewound and resting in my lap. The traveler smiled faintly. "Will you keep it?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "But not to hold on, just to remember that it existed." He nodded. "That's what love really is." As we reached the cliff road again, the sun began to break through. I rolled down the window. The sea wind came in, warm, wild, alive. The traveler switched off the static radio, and for once, silence felt like music. And then, I heard it faint. Almost imagined the melody of Willow Road, played somewhere between the sea and the sky. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel alone. The town looked smaller when we came back. Maybe it was the way evening light softened the edges of everything. The rooftops, the roads, even the memories. Harbor Light Cafe stood the same, patient as always. The bell above the door, waiting to remember our names. The traveler carried the cassette in his jacket pocket. Neither of us spoke during the drive. Words felt unnecessary after the ocean had already said everything. When we reached the cafe, I unlocked the door, and the air inside greeted us with the scent of coffee, dust, and time restarting. He placed the tape on the counter. "You should keep playing it," he said. "But maybe not for him this time." I tilted my head. "Then for who?" "For yourself." He smiled, a quiet, understanding smile, the kind people give before leaving. Something in my chest ached the way hearts do when they recognize endings disguised as kindness. The sky outside was turning gold. I set the tape in the old recorder behind the counter and pressed play. Ethan's guitar filled the room again, gentler now, as if distance had taught it how to breathe. I didn't cry this time. I listened. And somewhere between the chords, I realized I was no longer hearing Liz, I was hearing light. The traveler leaned against the doorframe, hands in pockets, gaze tracing the fading sun. "Willow Road," he murmured. "I think I found it." I smiled. "Where was it?" He tapped his chest. "Right here." We stood quietly as the song ended. The silence afterward didn't hurt. It simply rested, like a cat curling into warmth. He turned to go. "Where will you go next?" I asked. "Wherever another echo needs returning." He paused, then looked back once more. "Thank you for letting me listen." "Thank you," I said, "for bringing the music home." The bell rang softly as he stepped out into the dusk. Through the window, I watched him walk down the road until he became part of the horizon, a line between sky and earth. That night, I kept the cafe open a little longer. I brewed one last pot of coffee, opened the windows, and let the evening air drift in. The world outside was quiet, except for the faint rhythm of rain beginning again. I picked up a notebook and began to write, not to Ethan this time, but to the moment itself. The pen moved easily, as if it had been waiting all these years. Some songs don't end, they change singers. When I finished, I placed the note in the cigar box with the others. Then, for the first time in a decade, I added a new one. Its envelope read, "To tomorrow." The wind lifted the curtain, and moonlight slipped through the window like forgiveness. And in that soft light, surrounded by echoes and coffee steam, I finally understood. Love doesn't stay because someone remains. It stays because someone remembers. Outside, the rain whispered the same old rhythm, under the same sky. Morning came like forgiveness. Soft light rested on the windows of Harbor Light Cafe, turning every droplet of rain into a spark. The bell above the door chimed once, though no one entered. It was just the wind, remembering how to arrive. I brewed coffee for two out of habit. The second cup sat opposite me, steam rising like something invisible made visible. For the first time, it didn't hurt. Some silences, I realized, aren't empty, they're full of what love leaves behind. I placed the old recorder on the counter and pressed play. Not Ethan's tape this time, but a new one. Last night, before sleeping, I recorded my own voice, the first sound I'd spoken only for myself in years. "This is for tomorrow," I said on the tape. "For whoever finds it, or maybe just for the air." There was once a song called Willow Road, and it taught me that every ending is just another verse we haven't sung yet. The voice on the tape sounded steadier than I expected. Older, yes, but whole. As the tape played, sunlight spilled across the counter, catching the edges of the old letters stacked neatly in their box. The one on top still read, "To tomorrow." Outside, the traveler's truck was gone. Only tire marks curved down the road toward the horizon, like a line drawn in a notebook, never finished. I didn't feel sadness. Only a quiet gratitude he had brought back what I didn't know I'd lost. The will to listen again. I took out a piece of stationery, wrote a single line, and pinned it to the notice board above the espresso machine. "If you're lost, sit here a while. The rain knows your name." Then I opened the windows wide. The morning air entered, carrying the scent of the sea, of distance, of return. Somewhere, faint but clear, a melody floated in the familiar chords of Willow Road. Not from a tape, not from memory, but from outside someone was playing it. Maybe a passerby, maybe the traveler, maybe just the wind. I smiled. And for the first time in years, I sang along. Not for the past. Not even for Ethan. But for what came next.